Hello and welcome back to the Historical Humans podcast. We're on lucky episode number 13 and we've got a doozy for you. We're going to be talking about the Beringian land bridge that connected Siberia to Alaska. And I think without further ado, I'll introduce my fellow co-host here. I'm with Colum Coleman and Gwendolyn Allen. My name's Justin Woods. And Colum, do you just want to jump right in? Let's go and let's talk about Beringia, baby.
All right. So, Beringia is this combination of just land and sea. It's just a sort of territorial space between Russia and Canada. It stretches all the way from Siberia, across the Bering Strait, through Alaska, and into Canada. So, Alaska is almost completely consumed within the Beringia. That's why it's Russia to Canada. We did not just sink Alaska into the ocean, we promise you.
I was about to say, are you an Alaska denier? Long
No.
live
It's like North
Beringia.
Dakota.
Uh, no, I'm a firm believer in the Allen's theory of how people populated the Americas, because that's what Beringia is. It's a theoretical and scientifically proven space for how people crossed from Asia to the Americas to initially populate the Americas many thousands of years ago without the use of Allens.
It was basically the doorway into the new world.
Yeah. Yeah. So, give you a bit of a geographical boundaries for this territory. Beringia is everything between the Lena River in Russia and Mackenzie River in Canada. And it goes from about the 72-degree north latitude in the Chukchi Sea to the southern tip of the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. I said that.
Sure.
Yeah. This area was once mostly, if not entirely, land during the Pleistocene epoch, also known as the Ice Age, about 1.75 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago. And fun fact about the Ice Age: despite the name, it had warm and cold periods.
Wait, you mean the Pleistocene had a lot of different variable climates?
Well, it is 1,750,000 and 990 years ago.
But also to the fact of that it only ended about 10,000 years ago, people don't realize how quick or how recently that was. In the terms of like North America, that's when the Great Lakes formed. The Great Lakes are some of the newest large bodies of water on the planet.
Yep. Yep.
They're geographic babies.
They are. They're dirty babies, but they're babies.
Yep. And it's in the last cold period of the Ice Age that we get those glaciers that the Ice Age is famous for, that carved their way through the Rocky Mountains and dug in a lot of those Great Lakes. And it's these glaciers that actually create the Beringia out of what is today the Bering Strait, because they absorbed all this water, and the water level of the planet dropped by about 300 feet.
God, that's crazy. That's a lot.
This is effectively the inverse of what we are doing to the planet now times like 10.
Oops.
Except humans didn't cause this one.
Yeah.
But this change in the weather and this freezing, it sucked up so much water into ice that pieces of land started emerging, and that's where the Bering Strait actually became this large grassy land. And it effectively connected the two major continents because you still had water to the north and to the south. It was just this tiny little isthmus that connected the two bridges of land.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 1,000 miles north to south too. This is not a small thing. There's a reason the southern border is the tip of Kamchatka.
Kamchatka, yeah.
The tip of that peninsula. That is a very long peninsula, and it is. So this is 1,000 miles wide, just highway for people to walk across, full of grass and game and other little things that naturally begin to form when you have a massive stretch of land.
But the crazy thing too that they don't really mention a lot is the weather and the temperature of this area wasn't that far off from what current Alaska is like. During the summer, it would get up to 46, 47 degrees Fahrenheit, which is well above freezing and a pretty comfortable weather when you went surrounded by ice and everything else is frozen and you're in an area that is not frozen. It's going to feel pretty good.
Still very cold.
It's like when you just get out of winter and you have that like one really nice, like it would be a cold spring day, but you're like, ooh, time to break out the shorts. That might just be a Midwestern thing. But
everyone wearing shorts and
it's like
t-shirts.
so good comparatively.
It's like 45 degrees.
Like, break out the shorts, the tank top, let's go.
Yeah, and just for those of you who use Celsius out there and are thinking 45 degrees, that's boiling. We're all going to die in the desert. Those of you who use Celsius, this is just over 7 degrees Celsius. So this is still a very chill environment. Just not freezing to death.
Yeah, and that's the important part.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, once this land started emerging from the water, you started seeing a proliferation of plants, animals, and then eventually people. And, when a new piece of land opens up and you see a bunch of animals and a bunch of tasty plants, you're going to go, maybe I should go over there and check it out.
Yep. Yeah, and this whole process, this didn't happen overnight. This is a 27,000 year period where this bridge is open and stable for people to cross. This is 38,000 to 11,000 years ago is about the time when this bridge forms and can actually start sustaining life and people just sort of begin to move around on it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too because you see people on both sides of the bridge share a lot of common cultural items, a lot of traditions, a lot of language groups. And we'll get a little bit more into it later, but they also share a lot of DNA.
Yeah,
that's such a smile right there. You're like, I can't wait. I can't wait. Let's get there.
This is my area. This is what really gets me going.
Yeah. One of the other fun things about it too is that we'll get into more detail later. The people living on the old world side, on the Siberian Russian side of the strait, once it reforms across Beringia, knew about the people living in what is now Alaska. They knew like before Chris Columbus and all the rest of it. They just sort of, there's people over there.
Yeah.
They're there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Alaskans also like traveled that and would trade, so it's not like they were, mysterious people.
Yeah, old world, new world contact goes on for a while in Siberia.
It's like you keep learning that it goes much further before Christopher Columbus, that jackass. But to move past that, there are also there are several islands that remain of the Beringia land bridge, specifically called the Diomede Islands, and then other islands that I do not know how to pronounce of St. Paul and St. George.
Yep. Pribilov.
Cool. I would not have said that.
Kind of a cool fact about the Diomedes, though, is they are the closest geographically bordering areas between the United States and Russia. They're only about 1.2 miles apart from each other. And on one side, you still have native inhabitants, but on the other side, they got kicked off and is a military installation. I believe it was Russia who kicked the people off, but I could be mistaken there.
Let's say that sounds like something Russia and the United States would do, so I'd be more surprised that not everyone got kicked off.
But they're quite literally smack dab in the middle, like the closest border. You could literally see Russia from America, unlike certain former vice presidential candidates who claim they could, but they live 500 miles away. But
literally just about to make that joke in that voice in an impression, but I won't do it.
We don't
Fine.
talk about her. Don't invite the crazy onto this channel. All right.
Okay.
Came close enough.
There's also St. Lawrence and King Island as well. I forgot to add that in there. So.
Yep. Yes, that's a little bit of the history of the landmass itself. And there is today the United States government has designated Beringia to be a national monument. They did that in 1978. And then 2 years later, in 1980, the U.S. created the Bering Land Bridge National Preserve to better preserve some of the very unique geography that remains from the Bering Strait, because it is a weird minefield out there of just seemingly random and erratic physical features.
You mean like the mountains or the volcanic fields or the rolling tundra or the
I like the Mars.
Yeah.
Which, for those playing along at home, are shallow volcanic depressions.
Yeah.
Ooh, you also have the Thermocast Lakes, which are lakes formed from a depression of the thawing.
It just
permafrost.
creates, basically as the ice in the ground melts, it just creates this sinkhole of water. My personal favorite are the pingos.
That sounds like a slur.
Which is what,
oh my God, Justin.
Which is what happens effectively when, as ice moves across the earth, it just rips something up and shifts and shoots it upward into a giant spike. These 90-meter tall just mounds of just sharpened earth.
Oh, we like when the earth fights back.
Yeah.
But then, even now in current day, the Bering Strait is only about 53 miles wide at its narrowest. So, it still isn't super wide. I mean, some water's gotten through, so a lot of the bridge is still roughly there. But, yeah, it's not quite its former glory.
It's now the Bering Strait instead of the Beringia land bridge.
Exactly, yeah.
Not quite swimmable distance, but, boats can make it fairly easily.
Also, I highly wouldn't recommend swimming in the Bering Strait because it mixes the Arctic with the Pacific, and that water's freezing.
Well, I'm not saying that everything else won't kill you. I'm just saying the distance alone, not quite swimmable.
Oh.
I mean, there are people that do swim in the Arctic. It's not something you should do, but it is something you can do if you have the right preparation and go a short distance.
All right, so who's going to swim the 53 miles through the Bering Strait?
Not me. I do not have enough layers of fat to keep my body warm. So
we're not doing that, Justin. Go join the Polar Bear Club at Lake Michigan. You want to freeze yourself to death.
I've done the polar plunge.
Dude, the polar plunge is terrifying because that's in Lake Michigan. Not only is it cold, but it's also dirty.
Surprisingly, Michigan's
cold and it's full of
cleaner
lampreys is what it is.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, yes, back to the Bering.
The Bering Strait. This is an idea of the existence of the strait. It's been around for a pretty long time. It's been around for about 400 years as a scientific theory. Yeah.
So you have Fray Jose de Acosta, which was a Spanish, or who was a Spanish missionary. Back in 1590, was the first known written record suggesting the Beringia land bridge, and questioned the origin of the population in the New World, which was a very popular debate at the time. And he believed that the land bridge between Asia and North America still existed, and correctly theorized that hunter-gatherers followed animals across this land bridge from Asia into the New World. And we'll see evidence of that as we go through different archaeological expeditions and things like that.
Yeah. One of the funnier things about the original theory that I saw is he appeared to have theorized that not only was Beringia still in existence, but that Beringia was in California.
Ooh.
Like Northern
Swing and a
California, what we
miss.
would call today, Oregon.
It's just geography was hard back then. You couldn't always trust the maps.
Also, Alaska's fucking huge. So, like, you don't think that there's this massive place all the way up there, but it goes and it goes.
Yeah. And so that was, but he was right that, there would be a bridge. Just very wrong about where and how long it would last.
But then we
there's still a little bit there, so it wasn't incredibly wrong.
But it was incredibly long, especially when you're working from the sort of, I guess, Renaissance Christian perspective of the world, where everything has to happen in the last 10,000 years or else.
But hey, they moved it to 10,000. Last time I heard, it was like 6,000 or something.
I don't know. I'm being generous with these people.
I think it's like 4,000. It's real. It's
not 4,000. It's at least 6. It has to be more than 4,000 by virtue of the fact that they, that like Moses makes it more than 4,000 by himself alone.
Regardless, they're wrong in general. We also have the Bering and Cook expeditions that followed this. They were the voyages in 1724
Bering
and
Voyages.
1741.
The Bering Voyages. They're separate from the Cook ones. Cook comes second.
Oh, okay.
Bering is the guy who gives the strait its name because he was the guy who got there first.
Vitus Bering, a Danish explorer.
Yep.
It's commissioned by the Russian Tsar, Peter the Great.
Seems pretty great if he's commissioning explorations.
I love those, but it was led by a Danish person.
Yeah.
It was commissioned by a Russian person.
The Spanish exploration that found America was led by an Italian.
You commissioned the better
was hired by the
sailors.
Spanish crown. He was an Italian.
That is something I forget consistently. Spanish, Italian, I don't know.
But I think the purpose of it was to just map the boundaries of Siberia.
Yeah. Which some maps had already indicated the existence of Alaska, so it's kind of just to confirm those things.
Yeah, it was set up to confirm it and to determine exactly how far Russia went. As some maps, these are all maps of Russia's domain and the surrounding territories. Some of them show Alaska, some of them don't. Does Russia control Alaska? Is that part of Russia? Is that something that's not there at all? What the hell is this?
Yeah.
Because we don't have no diplomatic relations with these people.
But yet you had trade with these people because, Alaskan peoples had been crossing the strait for years. And so trade existed between them and the Russians in the Chukchi Peninsula. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
We have no idea. It's
okay,
Russian.
Cool.
Chukchi.
Yeah, but it's, so that was the purpose of these expeditions that basically confirmed that, hey, you could probably pretty easily cross at this point. And saying it's how we're already doing it with, vessels that aren't major seafaring vessels like we think of them, today, with these massive ships with several masts designed to get rolled by storms. These
but Alaskan canoes are beautifully made. Incredible.
Canoes are beautifully made and is a good work of artisanship and craftsmanship there. It's not designed to exactly sail out into the middle of nowhere and take a storm.
Well, it's true, but
they were smarter.
It gets the job done. It does a really good job.
They were smarter than to bother trying for that.
But then we have my good old buddy Captain James Cook, which we did do a Historical Humans Explains episode on.
We've done a lot of things about Captain Cook.
And he was an English explorer, a British, and in 1778 he provided detailed maps of the Alaskan coast and was the second explorer. Can you name the first one to confirm the existence of Alaska?
Vitus Bering.
Except this man spread the news of Alaska to Europe, aka outside of Russia, because Russia wasn't very known to.
Russia didn't like to share. Russia didn't really care. It wasn't considered a major discovery to the Russians. It was more just we confirmed what we already knew, that there's something over there. It's not us, so go away.
Russia being the introvert of Europe at the time.
Yeah. It's Peter the Great. So Russia is currently figuring out what modernization is. They're in the process of trying to catch up to the rest of Europe in terms of technology.
Oof.
Alrighty.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time
sorry, go on.
Speak, damn it.
I was going to say this leads to the land bridge theory, which we've been basically talking about. Just that there was a wide plain that connected Asia to North America, Siberia to Alaska, and this is around the time that Americans started really coming into the picture around the 1800s, when scientists and naturalists began looking at archaeology.
Yep, yeah. Basically, the concept of North American archaeology became a thing in the early proto days of archaeology that it was. This consisted of finding hills and blowing them up.
It wasn't the best process.
At least we weren't Heinrich Schliemann.
Yeah, and in the process, all these all these early archaeologists and naturalists discovered something interesting. The Native Americans had been native to the Americas for a considerable period of time. And it became increasingly impossible to deny that.
Which I don't think they were very happy about, but yeah.
Yeah.
But they found a bit of evidence that showed that North America was populated from people from another continent, and that there may be more to this theory.
Yeah, and they build up this body of knowledge, and then around 1890 to 1925, this about 35-year period, everyone just stops. There's people just there's no point going further. We don't have any data that expressly says the Native Americans came from Asia, or that there was this land bridge, or any of that stuff. How inconsiderate of them not to leave a sign written in English.
Well,
during this time, they were also probably slightly distracted by some other things going on.
Yeah, in the middle there is World War I, but still, for the most of this period, the United States is not in particular turmoil.
The economic collapse of the 1890s.
Yeah.
The economic...
like I said, not particular turmoil. It's America. We're at war or in a depression. We have two settings.
But to be fair, a lot of times these gaps in research and knowledge aren't for a lack of trying or a lack of want to. A lot of times, especially within archaeology, they won't continue looking at a site or investigating if they don't believe their research methods are up to par. Sometimes you pause to wait to let science catch up to you. Other times it could be funding. It could be just research based. I don't think it's so much that people are just like, yeah, we're done. We're going to move along. I think it was more so either funding dried up, other things came up, or they're just like, we're going to wait until we can figure this out a little bit better.
Yeah, this was
their politics.
This was also about the time too that American archaeology was undergoing its major face over with Franz Boas.
Oh, good old Daddy Boas.
Because this is about the time that he is establishing his four-field approach to archaeology. So archaeology is currently getting itself a methodological makeover during this time, and in part to the fact that the current style of North American archaeology from the 19th century had kind of stalled out on what it could answer.
Yeah. And
so it's currently undergoing this makeover.
Yeah, but luckily, during the 1930s, this Bering land bridge crossing becomes a very widely accepted theory. Yeah. And then we get more evidence of this as it goes on.
Yeah, that's thanks to a man named David M. Hopkins, who is a geologist of all things from University of New Hampshire. His big thing was he kind of took what was essentially the general idea of Franz Boas, four-field approach to archaeology of just, maybe talk to people who aren't in your field.
What?
And just ran with that and went out of his way to try and bring in people from other fields to explain what he saw as a geologist in what is the Bering Strait.
Mind blown.
Yeah, yeah. He worked with some pretty famous names, including a number of early uh, early female scholars at the time, including Mary Edwards, Claudia Hoffle, and Victoria Gothicus Wolff. I can't say her middle name, but Victoria Wolff. There we go.
Yeah.
I will say, yeah,
we love early feminists. Let's go.
Yeah, it's the early female scholars.
Also, giving them proper recognition for the shit that they do. Very nice.
Yeah.
You mean
they deserve a lot of that recognition because they didn't get as much recognition as they would have today for what they did on account of the fact that they were women working with a man. So a lot of things that come out intentionally or otherwise by David Hopkins, tend to focus on David Hopkins doing everything when it's like, no, there's 20 other people on this paper.
Yeah.
It's not just this man leading around 7 women.
Gallivanting around.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's one of the earliest points of interdisciplinary study that we see, which as modern archaeologists today, me and Justin particularly, we like to see that. That's very good, because when you're in a bubble, you get things like historiography where you're just obsessing over some minute detail that doesn't have bearing on anything else.
Yeah, and you want to have a lot of outside perspectives and viewpoints because there might be something that you don't know and someone else might. And here we saw their collaboration together. What they ended up doing was they studied plants in a frozen ash layer of a Devil Mountain eruption from about 18,000 years ago. So they're able to look at the ecology and study the plant level. And what they're able to see is that there was a diverse and variable array of plant life in the land bridge. And further archaeological excavations actually did what's called a core sample, where they dig really deep down into the earth. And they study pollen and seeds that are present in the soil. And they confirm that as well, that there was a vast array of plant life that would have more than sustained numerous populations of animals and even people.
Yeah, and one of the big things that they did confirm, even with this earlier study with Hopkins, is that the vegetation was not only this diverse prairie, but that it was radically different than what was currently in, say, the Alaskan area. That the Ice Age and the Bering Strait had with the land bridge, had created its own unique environment to sustain life.
And with that, you could tell that on the land bridge, it wasn't going to support the kind of animals that we generally saw in Alaska with those woolly mammoths and woolly elks and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you saw different kind of animals in this strait than there. So it wasn't just like they completely moved over. It was different kind of environment.
It's not all seals and geese.
Yeah. Way of saying it, yeah.
But then it gets to my favorite aspect of the whole theory, which is the migration of people.
Yeah.
Yes, Justin,
the most important part of Beringia and the whole land bridge is that people used it to populate 2 entire continents worth of humans.
Yep.
Yes. Which, you're right. So plants, animals, and people all cross that bridge from Asia to North America. And humans have populated North America for at least 16,500 years. So they've been there for quite a long time. And then they've done a lot of mitochondrial genetic studies on a lot of the populations, in which they were actually able to see that there were 3 distinct major migrations. And actually one of the earliest migrations that's tied to the Beringian standstill, where people were stuck on the Beringian land bridge because glaciers covered most of North America.
Yeah. And let's be honest, it's 1,000 miles wide and it's a prairie. Who's not going to settle there when it's lasting for 20,000 years?
Like I said, above freezing, and you're surrounded by glaciers on either side. It's kind of a nice place.
Mm-hmm.
And The standstill, though, from 25,000 to about 20,000 years ago, people became genetically isolated from those in Asia, which means that you no longer saw the same intertwining of the DNA, and you can actually identify a distinctive group that had broken away from that. So they had started evolving down their own trajectory, and that is the first level of that migration route. And it's one of the ways in which we're able to tell when people had migrated into North America, because that initial migration, that first migration, has a different genetic signature than the subsequent second and third, who have a more European lineage.
Yeah, and
Or
Justin,
Asian lineage.
Asian
Sorry.
lineage, and Justin, I just want to step in and make sure to clarify one thing with you here. You said evolving along their own path. I just want to make it clear that it was evolving and not devolving, because there was a little bit of a glottal stop at the beginning that sounded like a D.
Oh, no. It is like,
no, they are not devolving into Native Americans. It's not a de-evolution.
No, they are.
I want to stop right there before the insane comments go off.
No. Yeah, they are evolving. There is no devolving. They are moving forward. And when there was a DNA study that was done between 600 Native Americans and a Stone Age skeleton, the skeleton was from Maita near Lake Baikal in Siberia, and the mitochondrial DNA that was present in Native American was not found there. But the mitochondrial DNA is passed along matrilineally, so through the mother.
Yeah, so it's, you will always have, your mother's mitochondrial DNA. So if you have a female ancestor at any point who shares,
which you would have to,
who shares with these people, with a group of people, then you have that mitochondrial DNA.
Yeah. But they have tested the standstill, and they do show some lineage into Siberia and into the Kamchatka Peninsula. So there is some direct lineage with the Inuit, and a lot of the Siberians who live there today share a lot of lineage. Although, granted, it's about 20,000 years removed at this point. But
yeah, and additionally to that, it's not just people living. It's not just Native Americans on one side. Asians on the other. There's also the people living in within Beringia itself end up becoming distinct from both groups.
Yeah.
With was it the Upward Sun River site, which is 11,000 years old, and it's in Alaska, and they're they're genetically distinct from the rest of the Native Americans in Alaska and from the East Asians, which scientists have taken to indicate that they were the people on Beringia when Beringia went to sink back into the sea and just sort of walked off to one side. Before it was that or drowning.
Well, and
yeah,
that also indicates too that you have pass-through populations that continued on migrating, while you had some that are like, actually, you know what, it's kind of comfortable here, I'm just gonna stay back. Like, you guys go ahead.
Yeah. Again, you have 1,000 square miles.
And it's really interesting, because then after the Beringian standstill, you begin to see the glaciers receding, effectively forming two routes that are very contentious in the field of archaeology, although it's starting to change now. The first of which was referred to as an ice-free corridor, which opened up through Alberta in Canada because the ice sheet receded from the Rocky Mountains outward. So that's how people initially believed that the Americas were populated, was through this ice-free corridor. However, the corridor opened about 13,500 years ago. So it coincides roughly with the arrival of the Clovis people. However,
Beringia is still open at this time. Beringia does not sink back into the sea for another 2,500 years after this corridor opens.
Or the second one, which is becoming more widely populated, is called the coastal theory, which it theorizes that people, instead of hanging out in Beringia forever while waiting for the door to open, they got in their boats and they scuttled down the coast until it got to a point where they can actually land and populate. One of the supporting aspects of this is referred to as the Kelp Highway. And the Kelp Highway is a kelp forest that stretches from northern Japan all the way along the Pacific Rim down to about central California.
Yeah.
So follow the food, and it'll take you long.
And additionally, a bit of a retroactive thing that also supports this theory a little bit is that cultures in both East Asia, Polynesia, and the Americas, they tend to have some fairly functional maritime traditions.
Yes.
Like they tend to have adapted their culture and knowledge and skills towards dealing with things like water.
And one of the other things that makes that theory a little bit harder to prove, the coastal migration, is that part of the seabed is now actually submerged beneath the water because after the glaciers rose, it flooded a lot of the land. So if there were any coastal campsites, they'd be inundated. And there have been a couple that were located around Vancouver and Washington that show some pre-Clovis evidence, although a lot of those sites tend to have some fundamental research flaws.
But there is one that you were talking about that is very supportive. Do you want to go into that?
Yes. So one of the most widely accepted pre-Clovis sites is called Monte Verde, and it's located in South America. I believe it's Chile or Argentina. It's in the mountains. But the site dates back to 14,500 years ago, which predates Clovis by 1,500 years, roughly.
Yeah.
And when you start contextualizing that distance versus what we said previously with the ice-free corridor and Beringia, the timeline doesn't quite match up. Yeah. And it would be impossible for someone to get from Beringia to Monte
southern
Verde.
Chile. It's southern Chile. It's way down there. You're basically on the southernmost tip of South America, so you've crossed the entire continent.
It's like 14,000 miles.
Yeah.
It's a enormous amount of distance, and for that to be roughly about, I don't know, 1,500 years before when the ice-free corridor actually opened, it becomes a lot more convincing that people got here previously somehow. Mm-hmm. And like I said, a lot of the other sites, there is evidence for a pre-Clovis society. However, Clovis isn't a culture that we are aware of. The only way we're able to identify Clovis is by their projectile points. They make these beautiful fluted points that are massive and rare, but we don't know of any evidence prior to that.
Yeah, it's a technology rather than an actual cultural, actual fully fledged culture. It's sort of like saying, and these are the saddle people. These are all the people who have saddles. It's just like, that's like 2/3 of everyone.
And it doesn't help that you can also teach people, different kinds of people, trade with other people for tools and whatnot. And you're like, even back then, you're going to have cross-cultural contact anyways.
Yeah.
So just going on like one kind of tool is very hard to be like, yes, this one culture.
Yeah. Yeah. In more modern terms, this is the iPod people. Right.
The iPhone users.
We're tracking the presence of iPhones and treating it like that's the entire cultural people here. And it's like, possibly not, but yeah, they do have something in common.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because there's a lot of evidence that's starting to come out that shows that it's pretty likely and almost guaranteed that people were in the Americas before the ice-free corridor even opened, which the only logical thought is through a coastal migration in the Kelp Highway. And we know that people were adapted to that. We've seen in campsites that people who were in Beringia even would utilize the kelp. They would actually farm it. So, it's not unlikely that people were traveling along the coast and then got to Beringia and went, hey, this actually isn't half bad.
Yeah. And some of the people in who inhabited Alaska during this period too, they have their own distinct technological culture as well with the Paleo Arctic tradition that we've talked about. It starts about 14,000 years ago, and it's It's distinct from the Paleo Indian and the Clovis traditions that we were talking about with those particular tool points. And it's got it's a lot of stone tools jargon that I personally don't understand. A lot of things are bifacial. So I'm going to assume that means that they are like Two-Face from the Batman.
Well, so bifacial working on stone tools, when you are crafting the stone tools, you are knocking chips off from both sides of the face, and it creates this serrated edge, like a knife, like a steak knife. So bifacial working is really, really intricate technology, and that shows a high level of craftsmanship of the Flint Knappers, but that also shows that they're sharing that technology. And actually, the bifacial working is something that does evolve eventually out of the Beringian standstill, because in Siberia, thanks to global warming, a lot of sites are actually thawing out of the permafrost, including a lot of mammoth kill sites and a lot of other big game kill sites that are showing kind of that transition from unifacial working, which is like single face, to bifacial. It is just incredible. And microblading is specific knapping technology that creates these tiny little microblades.
Yeah. It is very fun to make stone tools. If anyone ever gets the chance to make them, I definitely suggest it. It's very fun. You're going to want to bring Band-Aids because you're definitely going to cut yourself. I made Obsidian stone tools, and I had more Band-Aids than I did hands at the end of it, but it is very cool to do and to use because you maybe need like 3 tools, 4 tools just to get it done, and they're mainly bones and other rocks.
You could buy a kit online. I've been looking at it because I want to.
Made this in like 2015. It's a really bad scraper. You can see just where I was napping along the edge to sort of make it. I do have this around me. I have another one that's even worse than this. I got worse on the second try. This is actually the good one. But yeah, you can
let me go see if I
can
find my obsidian.
Yeah,
see, I have my bag of flakes. I made a ton of flakes, but I put my projectile point in a box in my closet.
Got a pretty good grip, like this, and you just sort of take this bladed edge here and you just sort of scrape. It's great. It's great. It's great. Very anti-thumb making this. Just you will smack so many different parts of yourself.
Well, maybe we could do that as a separate content piece of us flint knapping, because that'd be interesting. But flint knapping is cool because you make these tools, and with Obsidian specifically, it's actually sharper than modern medical equipment, to the point where they're in certain surgeries they actually use Obsidian tools because they are so sharp and so precise.
Yeah, so I found a scraper that I made. I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is Obsidian. I have to keep it in specific cloth so that I don't like cut through things.
Yes.
That I have to like unfold from it. I should have another one. So I'm here. Hold on. I'm gonna mute so that the crinkling doesn't.
Yeah, sorry for going dark and you got a little bit of a.
Well, if I knew we were doing show and tell, I would have brought my stuff out. And for those of you who are listening on Spotify or Anchor or Apple Podcast, we are currently showing off stone tools that were made. If you would like to see this, be sure to check us out on our YouTube channel at Historical Humans.
Here's another thin one that I made. This one cut me a lot because I was making kind of almost serrated edge with it. I don't know if you can really see it, but yeah, I was very excited to learn how to do this. So excited that I consistently cut myself, and I feel like I'm going to do that again, just handling it right now.
Were you wearing gloves?
No, we were not wearing gloves. We made these stone tools during my foundations of archaeology. Oh no, don't grab that, sweetie. That's sharp. Sorry, my cat really wanted to sniff the obsidian. We made it during our foundations of archaeology class, and our professor was like, let's theme it as if it's a zombie apocalypse. We'll use archaeology to survive. So, learning how to make stone tools and old pottery that was done by a lot of early humans, and specifically Native Americans uh, at the time was what we did. So I've shot with atlatls. I made these stone tools, our own pottery is very fun.
The ILLs are fun.
But not enough equipment for an entire class to be properly prepared for this. So a lot of band-aids.
I was gonna try and find my my touristy obsidian arrowhead that they give out to tourists to give Justin a heart attack on how artificially created it is, because it was a horribly kitsch version.
There is no such thing as a ethically sourced arrowhead. It was looted.
No, it's not loot. It's literally they took raw obsidian. They took like a laser cutter, cut out an arrow, threw it in a bin. It looks so horrible.
But while you guys were searching for that, I actually did find my genetic data that I was mentioning. And they took genetic samples from 54 indigenous Americans and from 17 different Siberian groups, and they genotyped them. And I'm not going to get into the genotypical jargon because it gets very heavy, but it was determined that there were 3 streams of Asian gene flow, and that most descended entirely from a singular group called the First Americans. However, speakers of the Aleut languages, where the Aleutian Islands get their names, get most of their ancestry from a second stream. And the third stream is for all the Na-Dene peoples speaking groups from Canada. They inherited theirs from the third stream of settlers. The information shows that the initial group is the one that headed southbound, presumably by the coast, all the way down to South America, which is supported by evidence that there were almost no reversals except for one case in Panama. They were able to find a case of genetic reversal.
Interesting.
So it's showing that, you know, it wasn't just one group that got off and exploded into a separate population, but this was a consistent, continual thing that happened a couple of times. One of the other things that I did a lot of research in and did a lot of studying is reconstructing the Paleo environment. So the landmass. And Colum, you mentioned it briefly earlier, but the Beringian land bridge, that's really redundant.
Bering Land Bridge, Bering Strait, Beringia.
Yes. But showed that it was primarily a shrub tundra, which would have supported small campsites, smaller foraging. Mm-hmm. But it showed that it could actually sustain a population.
Yeah, it's small game hunter gatherers. You're dealing with gophers and ferret type creatures. Rabbits and things like that, where it's like, pretty small. Oh, look, a bush with berries.
One of the interesting things I saw while reading was that they would burn animal bones. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you had to do with that is you would have the wood from the shrubs and you would heat up the animal fat and use that to get like a really high temperature to use the bones as like fuel for the fire to keep warm at night. And I thought that was so interesting that they had found these charred bones as evidence in archaeological sites.
Yeah, it's really interesting some of the ways in which they adapted to the local environment and to the to everything else, because one of the other things that they studied with the vegetation is that before the last glacial maximum, which is the last ice age, that the area was more of a birch, heath, graminoid tundra with minimum steppe elements. And that's a really fancy way of saying that it was sparsely populated, but it had a lot of shrubbery. And that it was there, and that there were a lot of aquatic ponds that had plants, and that they found a lot of insects that were indicative of the climate. It just showed that the insects showed that the summer temperatures were actually warmer than they are in current day Alaska. So it was a very, very inviting climate.
Yeah, especially when your options are this or Alaska.
Yes. Well, and a lot of archaeologists are currently studying this by going into the Bering Strait and taking core samples deep down into the soil, and trying to recreate the climate, because one of the ways we could recreate the climate is looking at the palynology, looking at the soil samples, measuring contents of nitrogen and carbon, and just seeing what that environment would have looked like. Because humans, as smart as we are as creatures, we tend to follow a lot of basic steps throughout history of, like, we look for inviting environments, we look for where food production's the easiest, where there's a lot of options for food.
Yeah, we follow patterns because we want to live.
we prefer surviving and eating.
Like, the people who did not follow these patterns typically died and did not live long enough to really be people.
That's why we became omnivores, so we'd have more options to survive.
But it is shown that during this time period, the majority of the diet was megafauna. They were eating mammoth, elk. They were eating anything that they could catch and kill. And that's honestly reflected in their tools, because their spear points are massive. And one of my favorite things is, you see the spear points, you think they're on a little spear and that these people are running up to the mammoth, like, jabbing it. They were smart.
They fucking launch it like atlatls, like I said,
And you use a ballista to hunt a squirrel. Here we go.
It's catapult.
Not on par with some of the logic we have going on with all those recreations where the guy's got the spear point, like the spear length is shorter than he is, and he's running up to the leg of the mammoth, like, it's like, that is. No, those are the people who died.
Yeah, no, they
get a Darwin Award. That's what they get. They don't get to eat.
How far do you think that they could fling a projectile using an atlatl accurately?
Accurately?
Like
you can do it really far.
Yeah, if you had to guess a number, how far would you think?
If I had to guess, I don't want to sound stupid.
Give it 50
I have
yards
really
minimum.
terrible depth perception.
All right, so not you, a functioning person.
Thanks. I would say, several yards, more than several yards. So I want to be vague about it.
Several yards, and then we've got 50 yards.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you are both wrong.
I said at least 50.
Modern archaeologists who have recreated atlatls and who have studied the method, and again, cultures that still actively use them for hunting, because there's still hunter-gatherers out there, you can actually fire a projectile over 100 yards.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't want to go like too long.
At least 50 from my own experience of missing at 20 feet.
Yeah. There's some people that claim you could get over 200 yards, and I haven't seen that accurately supported, but I wouldn't doubt it. But these projectiles were able to go a long, long way. And it's also interesting too, because you see a lot of field processing of mammoth bones. Like, you think of people killing and eating mammoth. Well, what they don't realize is there's usually a kill site, there's usually a butchering site, and then there's usually an inhabitation site. And as you go along, the mammoth gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. But you also, killing a mammoth, that allows you to feed a lot more people. But you can also have, leftovers, because there are ways to store meat even back then with the salting and the smoking.
There's a name for it.
There is, and I am trying to think of it. It is not on the tip of my tongue, but on the back corner of my tongue. I'm thinking of it. But I can't remember.
Pansawan?
I'm so not sure. But it is basically like creating beef jerky.
Yeah.
Which then helps with, not having a ton of food.
Well, and a lot of times, too, the whole animal was used. So, the hides were used for clothing, which was phenomenal because it was built for cold environments. So they were using that to insulate themselves from the cold. They would use the tusks and carve awls out of them, which were used for stitching and clothing creation. They burned a lot of the bones because, you kill a mammoth, there's a lot of bone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, you can boil the bones before you burn them so that you can get all of that good, what is it called? Bone marrow?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because those make fantastic soups. And then you can use them for logs. So you can use the fat for boiling, for cleaning, for taste, for a bunch of different stuff.
Lanterns too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, lantern. Well, I don't know if lanterns were a thing around then, but yeah.
This is burning fat at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see a lot of that too.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
What?
I was just going.
I didn't have anything to say. I just moved my hand across my face because my hair was,
I'm sorry. I thought I heard you talking, but effectively, you see a lot of the same lifestyles with descending communities like the Inuit in northern Alaska who live a very similar lifestyle to how they would have back then of utilizing the environment, utilizing the resources around you. Fishing would have been a heavy importance, so there's a lot of the sites are actually near bodies of water or near coastlines. Obviously, I mentioned they utilized the kelp a lot. They utilized animals. So it wasn't just big game hunter, and it's kind of frustrating because that's a relic of about 1950s archaeology, where it was like, man is big game hunter. Man would walk up and stab a mammoth, and we celebrated and ate it.
Man strong, big strong man. It's like, calm down.
Calm down, Shouty.
Yeah, but this is the Beringia landscape, land bridge. We, crossed through some shrubberies and whatnot. God damn it.
I have been refusing to make the Monty Python references very loudly, but yeah.
Pass through the shrubberies and, this is how, the first Native Americans and most Native Americans crossed over into the Americas, was following along, either the coast or the overland part of this, of this land bridge. No Allens required.
Now, can we talk some of the fringe theories real quick? Because some
you want to talk about all the Allens?
Yeah,
the Allens in the room.
Why do we got to talk about the Allens in the room? As an Allen named person myself, I don't think we should.
No Allens.
Ignore them.
But there were some theories that, God, one of the most ridiculous ones and absurd ones was that a Stone Age group from France sailed across the Atlantic to cross into North America because they found a couple of projectile points that vaguely mimicked their tool sets.
No. Here's the best fringe one. Here's the best fringe one. Jesus Christ, after dying on the cross, after he's officially dead, he's been resurrected, he's died for the sins, comes back, leads God knows who. It varies from Templars to Jews to just random people he found to North America, where they established these vast civilizations of mound builders and tool users, and then some people go savage and kill everyone.
Yeah, I'm gonna need people to calm down with that theory. There's so many times you read of the old missionary people being like, and we entered what is now North America or South America, and they're like, and we have found Eden. There are also these savages here, but we found Eden. I'm like, just shut up, please. God, why do we have to read this?
Hey, Ethiopia was the kingdom of Solomon until it suddenly wasn't. There is a lot of very interesting things, interesting theories for how things happened.
Well, in a lot of those theories, real quick, just to kind of close the door on that.
Close the door before we get into the Allens.
A lot of them end up... a lot of them are rooted in racism, and I think it's important to address because while it may not seem overtly racist just to think that or to have those theories, what it implies is it implies that the indigenous groups that have lived here and have subsisted wouldn't be able to if not for European invention. It's a very Eurocentric point of view.
It's not implying that, it's outright stating it. It goes so far as to outright state that these people can't even stack mud into a mound of earth. You literally can't bury people without European help, according to these theories, or extraterrestrial help if you want to go for the batshit crazy ones.
We're not going to the pyramids. We've had pyramids. We're not going there.
there's also the kind of racist ideas that the Native Americans that lived there were somehow pure and innocent and untouched. And that's also racist in itself because you're not acknowledging the full human beings that they are with their own complexities and morals and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
Which is also a very frustrating thing when you read things that say it's like, oh, it's Eden or these savages, because they can either be demons and savages or they can be like these untouched, innocent beings. It does not allow for kind of reality and them being their own people.
Yeah, my personal favorite for debunking all that, that dichotomy is the Aztecs. The Aztecs built beautiful, massive monuments of their own accord. They were also so deeply unpopular with everyone around them that the second there was a chance to start a war with them that might win, half of the tribes in the vicinity immediately turned on them.
We can talk about it.
They're not innocent and they're not barbarians. They're a culture.
Yeah, they're a culture with good and bad in it, like every other culture.
And
that is
the people who made them came across the Bering Land Bridge.
Yeah, full circle.
That is the Bering Land Bridge in our episode for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I guess that's a good point. We can tie a bow on it. If you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to drop a like down below and subscribe for additional content. If you're listening to us on one of our audio-based platforms, be sure to rate us, because that's something that we could definitely use some more of.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And give us suggestions of what you want to see in the future, any topics that you're really interested in learning more about, or things that you want to deep dive further in, as well, either from this episode, previous episodes, or stuff that we haven't even talked about yet.
And please be sure to subscribe to us if you haven't yet, or if you have, and for whatever reason, YouTube or another platform has unsubscribed you, as has been known to happen recently. Please make sure you're subscribed. That helps us out a lot, and it's such a small thing you can do.
Also, like the video so we know that you liked it. It's great to hear feedback.
Yep. And one last thing is in the upcoming weeks, our next topic, what is our next topic going to be? I believe it is Juneteenth.
Yes.
Yeah, I do believe so.
Our next topic will be Juneteenth, so you're going to get to hear us talk about that next time on this podcast.
Yep, and then after that, we're talking Sappho of Lesbos, our gay pride episode.
Yep. Yeah, the world's first lesbian, according to history.
According to history, yeah.
We found the first one.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for watching us. Like, this is halfway through our first season, so it's huge. It has been half a year, 6 months, our anniversary, and we've had some highs, we've had some lows, we've had some growing pains, but it's been quite a ride so far.
Yep.
Alrighty. Have a good day.
Yep. See you guys.